Hi everyone, my name is Karen, this is my channel RatherBeReading, and today I'm bringing to you my recommendations for Not Another Love Story. Monthly Recommendations is a Goodreads group created by Trina from Between Chapters and Kayla from Kayla Rain. I will leave a link to both of their channels and the Goodreads group down below so you guys can check it out. For February's monthly recommendations topic, we are doing Not Another Love Story. So this is obviously a bit of a play on Valentine's Day being in February, and quite often people do kind of lovey recommendations, and we are kind of flipping that around and doing the opposite and recommending books that don't really involve a romantic storyline. So I have 5 books that I want to recommend for this topic. It was actually a lot harder than I initially thought to find books that didn't really have a love story in them. I mean, obviously, as I'm sure you are aware, even when a book sometimes isn't necessarily focused on the romance, it does still have a romantic element like woven into the plot line. So it was a bit more difficult than I thought, but I do have, as I said, 5 books that I want to recommend. First off, we have a book that I have mentioned quite a few times on this channel, and that is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This is a historical fiction story set in World War II Germany, and it follows a young girl, Liesel, who has just been kind of adopted by new parents, and she is kind of learning to read and write. And it's kind of, the story very heavily involved books. I'm sure you all know what it's about. As I said, it's set in World War II Germany, and as it is about kind of a younger character, it doesn't really have any real romantic elements to the plot at all, really. I love this book. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I can't recommend it enough, basically. I think this is a book that everyone should read. It's just a really, really great book. I've mentioned it before. I'm mentioning it now. If you haven't read it, read it, basically, because it's really great and it doesn't really have any romance in it. So if you don't like romance, this is something you could definitely check out. Next, I wanted to recommend Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson. This is a book that is following a young girl, Melinda, who has been through a traumatic experience over the summer, and she is then going into her first year in high school, and due to this kind of traumatic event, she has lost kind of all of her friends, so she's going into this first year of school. She's really struggling, basically. She doesn't have any friends and she just feels really isolated. This book deals with a lot of topics surrounding depression and things like that, and not feeling like you have a voice and feeling alone. I think that this is a great book on that kind of topic, and this book really spoke to me when I read it. I related to the main character a lot. I'm not sure why, because I've never been through anything like what this character has been through, but her story really spoke to me, and this story really touched me. It doesn't really have a romantic story at all in it, and I think this is a really great book that everyone should read, but I also think this is a really great book for kind of younger YA readers to read, because I think it would help a lot of people, because high school sucks for a lot of people. Like, that's just a fact of life, and I think that this could help a lot of people if they read it, because I feel like it actually helped me a little bit, and I'm 27 years old, so I think if this book could speak to me on that level, then people who are like 14, 15 years old, it would really speak to them. So I definitely recommend checking this book out. And it also won the national, well, it didn't win, but it was a National Book Award finalist, so there's another recommendation for it right there. Next, I have To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This is obviously a book that a lot of people had to read in high school. I didn't have to read this in high school, but my brother did, and that's kind of where I first really found out what this book was about, was when he was reading it in high school, and I ended up checking it out a little while after that because it sounded really interesting, and I think this is a really great book. I also didn't read it for school, and I ended up really enjoying it. Maybe if I'd read it for school, I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much, who knows, but I did really enjoy this story. I know a lot of people really love this story. This follows a young girl, Scout, and her brother kind of growing up in the South, and just kind of being raised by their single father, and it deals a lot with issues of racism and things like that, and I just think this is a really great book. Basically, this was the winner of a Pulitzer Prize, so again, this is a prize-winning book, so if you haven't read To Kill a Mockingbird because you're thinking that it's a classic and you don't really know you know, if you would enjoy it, I recommend checking it out, because I think that this is a book that's actually really accessible for a lot of people. Like, it can be enjoyed by quite a wide variety of audiences, and I would definitely recommend picking it up, because I just really enjoyed it, and it's actually a book that I've been thinking about rereading this year, because I haven't read it in a few years and I just want to revisit it. So yeah, check this one out if you haven't. Next, I want to recommend Horns by Joe Hill. This was one that I wasn't sure at first whether to include it on the list, because it does kind of have some romantic elements, but they're kind of in flashback form. This book follows the main character. I think his name is Ignatius. Yeah, Ig, which I think is short for Ignatius. His girlfriend has been murdered. I think about a year previously to when this story takes place, his girlfriend was found murdered, and everyone in the town thinks that he did it. And he, about a year, as I said, after her murder, one day wakes up with horns sprouting out of his head. And he then, he also has kind of, when people speak to him, all of a sudden, like if they touch him, I think it's if he touches them or just if he gets near them, I can't quite remember, they start to tell him, like they just have no filter, and they start telling him all the secrets and their every thought basically that they have in that moment. And it just kind of follows Ig and his story following the murder of his girlfriend. So as I said, it does have some kind of romantic elements in the flashback when we see Ig with his girlfriend, but it's not a prominent part of the story, obviously, because she has been murdered, and so it's not a prominent part of the story. This book I really, really enjoyed. It is obviously more of a horror novel, so if that's not something you enjoy, you may not enjoy this one. But it does deal with some really interesting issues. I thought, especially surrounding, like the parts I found most interesting was the commentary on kind of being guilty in the public eye, even if you have not been found guilty in a court of law, but when the wider community has decided that you have been guilty of a crime, and the way that they treat you and how that can affect your life. And even not just his life, but the life of his like close family. I just thought that was really interesting, and I really enjoyed this story, and I really enjoyed the writing. So if you've been contemplating picking this up, I definitely would, because it's definitely worth a read. And the final book I want to recommend is Second Child by John Saul. I have spoken about this book once before on my channel, but I didn't really go into too much detail on it. I think it was in a tag video. This book follows a main character, Melissa, I believe her name is. Yeah, it doesn't say, but I'm pretty sure her name's Melissa, and her father has a child, a daughter from a previous marriage, who lives with her mother and her stepfather, and Melissa doesn't really know her or anything, but at the start of the story, her sister's mother and stepfather are killed, and so she comes to live with Melissa and her father and Melissa's mother. And so Melissa becomes kind of the second child, because she has this older sister come into her life. This is a like horror novel, I guess you would describe it. I read this in high school. I actually read quite a lot of John Saul in high school. It was a book that my sister owned and I borrowed from her, and I really, really loved in high school. I reread this, I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before, and I enjoyed it just as much as I did in high school. It's kind of like a creepy story. I believe there may be some elements in this of her like having a crush on like different guys and stuff like that, but there's not really any actual romantic part to the story. It's really enjoyable horror read that if you enjoy kind of a bit of a like cheesy kind of horror novels, like not cheesy, that's probably not a great word for it, I don't know how to describe it, but if you enjoy those kind of books, then I would definitely recommend picking this up, because it is really, really enjoyable, and it is my favorite book that I've ever read by John Saul. So those were my recommendations for Not Another Love Story. As I mentioned, it was quite difficult to come up with books that didn't really have any romantic plot lines in them at all. If you have any great recommendations for books that don't involve any romance, I would love to hear them down below. I'm generally not opposed to romance at all. I read straight up romance, and I also quite enjoy a good romantic plotline like in my other stories that aren't necessarily romance. But I'm quite happy to read books that don't involve romance at all. I'm just really not fussed either way. But if you have any great recommendations, I'm always looking for great books to read, so I'd love to chat to you guys in the comments below. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more. But that's all I've got for this video today. Bye guys.